Speaking of good practices, I want us to shift a little bit and think about what it is that makes an assessment good. What are the qualities we care about? Ross, why don't you start us off on this?
Yeah, good assessments. I mean, circling back to Melanie's point, a good assessment should be something that is important to assess. So I just want to mention that quickly. But the property of the assessment itself is a really important consideration. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that's still quite pervasive within higher education is that properties like validity and reliability refer to tests. And I think it's very important to move to the perspective that it's really the inferences we derive from test scores that can be valid. And so, for example, the epistemic distinction between observation and inference is something that most of us teach in our classes. I'm sure in chemistry, the distinction between observation and inference are key. Well, when we look at assessment data, we see an observation. Someone bubbled in a C, they bubbled in a D, they wrote this statement. That's an observation. We can draw many inferences from a single observation. My Zoom call could end right now and you could have 10 different inferences about why that happened. So the producing a good assessment is gathering evidence to support the inference derived from observations. And so the epistemic chain is very much like science itself, that is the chain of assessment evidence. It's how do we link observations and inferences with independent sources of evidence to confirm our inference is correct. Most assessments that we use in our classes lack any form of evidence to support our inferences. Concept inventories and other forms of assessments have moved the conversation forward to trying to gather stronger sources of evidence to make sure we know what we're claiming about the observations we gather. So validity and reliability are talked about a lot. They're not applied as much as they should be when we assess students in higher education. In fact, I think if most students knew that there's no evidence in many cases to support the claims we make about their abilities on their assessments, there could be a bit of a revolution. So I think the most important properties are validity and reliability, but many people misunderstand what that means. And so I think clarity, epistemic clarity on what we mean when we say validity and reliability is central to our communities moving forward to have a rich sense of that. So the answer in a nutshell is validity and reliability inferences, having strong sources of evidence supporting them. When we make a claim about the observations we gather, that is the score that we generate from a test, we know that that interpretation is correct.
Melanie, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would certainly support everything that Ross said. But I think that we also, so the idea of assessment as an evidence-based argument, right? So we have to elicit evidence of whatever it is that we want. And so we have to be very clear about what it is that we want. We have to have some kind of theory of cognition, right? And, you know, I don't think we need to put it up, but the assessment triangle that first appeared in Knowing What Students Know, the National Academy consensus report on assessment, it was written 20 years ago now. But this idea that you need to have an idea of where you're going with this. And I think that that has also been lost in the weeds. So for example, I think if you use concept inventories to measure learning, then your theory of cognition has to be different than if you think about learning as a connecting helping students connect the fragments and pieces and weave them together. So the knowledge in pieces perspective. So if you hold that perspective, then you would want to design assessments that would, well, one, see whether students have connected that knowledge, but also help them. Because I think that to me, a good assessment is a formative assessment, an assessment that can be used to help students not only get feedback on what they're doing, but also in the act of constructing their response, helps them become thoughtful and metacognitive about what they're actually doing. So helping students learn to write good explanations, good arguments, helping students to understand what makes a model, what are the components of a model, helping students to understand that a causal mechanism is something that can be used across disciplines. Once you understand how to do this, if we could all, get on the same page, we might help students use these different approaches across the disciplines. And I think that would be, and I think we're starting to do that. As Ross said, we have a project at MSU where we have across chemistry and biology, molecular biology and organismal biology, where we're looking at causal mechanistic reasoning across all three courses. And it's really interesting to have the different disciplinary aspects, to respect each discipline, but to understand how we can apply that kind of epistemic heuristic across not only different phenomena in one discipline, but across disciplines as well.